They woke each morning not to sunlight, but to the sound of dripping water echoing through the stone. The cave mouth never let much light inside. Dawn came like a rumor, faint gray shadows stretching across damp walls, never enough to chase away what lingered deeper. You imagine them yawning, stretching, rubbing ash from their eyes. But if you listen closely, if you really place yourself there, you hear something else. The silence. And the silence was never empty. We say cavemen spent their days hunting and gathering, but what we leave out is how much time they spent waiting. Hours crouched in brush, hours listening for the faint snap of a twig that might mean prey or predator. Do you know what the mind does in that much waiting? It wanders. It begins to fill the stillness with voices, patterns in the trees, faces in stone. And if you'd been born into that stillness, never distracted by screens or machines, what would you begin to notice? They noticed the way shadows crawled when no one was moving. They noticed the strange shapes fire made when it spat sparks into the cave ceiling. And most of all, they noticed the silence pressing back, as if the cave itself were breathing. Food was survival, but it was never simple. They stalked mammoth, reindeer, bison. Their feet sank into mud. Their spears quivered in cold hands. But bones tell us something strange. Too many fractures, too many healed injuries. As though violence wasn't just the cost of hunting, it was the rhythm of life. Imagine it. Every day, watching someone you love limp back with bloodied skin, their eyes wild, their mouth whispering something they never explained. You ask what happened, and they just shake their head. But sometimes, they didn't come back at all. And the next morning, the tribe still rose, still walked into the shadows, still hunted, even though they knew the silence was hungrier than they were. When they weren't hunting, they gathered. Roots torn from the earth, berries crushed between dirty fingers, nuts cracked open against stone. But here's the thing. Archaeologists discovered caches of plants with no nutritional value. Bitter herbs, toxic seeds, things that couldn't be eaten without pain. Why keep them? Who collected them? Some say it was a mistake. I don't believe that. I think they were feeding something else. And if you think that's ridiculous, look at the caves where those plants were found. Always in deep chambers, always near symbols carved into the walls, spirals twisting endlessly, handprints smeared in ash. Not a pantry, not a mistake, an offering. But the fire was different. Every group needed fire to survive. Warmth, protection, a way to cook food. But when the sun fell and flames danced against the cave walls, they weren't just cooking. They were watching. Flames bent shadows in strange ways. Have you ever stared at fire too long and sworn you saw a figure standing behind it? They did that every single night. Some of the earliest fire pits discovered were arranged not in circles of warmth, but in patterns. Stars, triangles, spirals, ashes ringed with bones. And here's the worst part. Bones not always from animals. Sometimes the bones were human. They didn't just burn for warmth. They burned to speak to something that answered in the smoke. Their children learned early. Archaeologists have found children's footprints pressed deep into clay floors, circling pits of ash. Tiny hands dipped in pigment, smearing blood-red shapes onto walls. Do you think the children laughed as they did it? Or do you think they cried, staring at their own painted hands, realizing no one had explained what the shapes meant, only that they had to make them? Because if the children stopped, the shadows stretched closer, and no one wanted to see what would happen if they refused. By daylight they hunted, by twilight they prepared, and by night they descended into rituals no one alive can fully reconstruct. We see fragments, spirals scratched into bone, skulls arranged in lines, not piles, teeth pulled from living mouths and left at the edges of fire. Why? Maybe they believed it kept the cave from swallowing them. Maybe they believed it fed the silence, so it wouldn't take their children. Or maybe they weren't pretending. Maybe they had seen something move in the dark. You want to know what cavemen did all day? They try to keep the darkness pleased. Every moment of survival wasn't just about food or fire or shelter. It was about bargaining with something they couldn't name, something that pressed on their chests when they lay down to sleep, something that whispered in the cracks of stone, something that left claw marks too deep for human hands. And do you really think they all survived it? Some skulls show holes carved into bone, as if something had been released from inside. Some show scratches made from within, teeth marks on the insides of jaws, as if they had bitten themselves trying to keep something from speaking through their mouths. These weren't accidents. These weren't random. They were part of the rhythm. It gets worse. The paintings. You've seen the bison, the mammoth, the deer. Beautiful, majestic. But have you ever noticed how many of those animals are pierced, bleeding, surrounded by hunters whose faces aren't shown? And if you follow the paintings deeper into certain caves, into areas no one could live, you stop seeing animals. You start seeing figures. Figures with bodies twisted in unnatural angles, limbs too long, heads cracked open with something black spilling out. Not art, not decoration, memory, and maybe warning. You want to feel unsettled? Listen to this. In the caves of Chauvet in France, handprints lined the walls. Hundreds of them. Many belong to children. But one, just one, appears larger than any human hand. Longer fingers. An impossible stretch from palm to tip. Archaeologists dismiss it as distortion from a stone. But if it was just distortion, why does that handprint appear again in another chamber, 30 meters away, at the exact same scale? What hand was guiding them? And what was it pointing toward? I imagine the evenings most of all. The tribe gathered, eyes wide, stomachs tight with hunger, the fire snapping, shadows crawling, the silence bending closer. A child begins to hum. A parent shushes them, but the hum doesn't stop. It grows louder, joined by others, until it's no longer a song but a chant. Feet stomp the earth. Dust rises. Hands slap the walls, leaving bloody prints that smear upward, as though reaching for something above. And in that chaos, in that desperate rhythm, they all stop suddenly, because they hear it. Another voice. One not belonging to any of them. I shouldn't tell you this, but the reports mention it. Some caves still feel wrong when entered. Archaeologists describe the air as heavy, as if someone is pressing down on their lungs. Others have fainted. Some refuse to go back. They don't publish those accounts. But the whispers remain, that in those caves, the silence is not silence. It's breathing. And if you stay long enough, if you let your eyes adjust, you might see the shadows rearrange themselves. Not randomly, but in circles. Always in circles. As though replaying something that happened thousands of years ago. A rhythm carved into stone itself. So what did cavemen do all day? They hunted, they gathered, they cooked, they raised children. But behind every act was the same truth. They were bargaining. Bargaining with the silence that answered back. Bargaining with the shadows that reached too far. Bargaining with something we've chosen to forget, though the evidence still waits in caves, in bones, in the clawed walls we pretend not to notice. And maybe you already feel it. That pressure at the back of your mind when the room goes too quiet. That shape you think you glimpse just beyond the firelight. You felt it as you listened. You recognized it. Because cavemen didn't stop it. They only taught it to wait. And it has been waiting, in the shadows, for us to remember.